Hey guys, what's up? My name is Georgie and welcome to my course. In this video lesson, I'm going to talk about the cinematography of the DSLR camera. Now, when it comes to cinematography, there's something we really have to keep in mind. There's a big difference when it comes to motion picture cameras and DSLR cameras. They are very close together, but what makes the DSLR different from motion picture cameras is its shallow depth of field. The DSLR camera can have such a shallow depth of field that a motion picture camera can't have. And that is something we have to work with. And the best way to explain this is by layers. So when we take a look at the keynote I've created here, there is our DSLR camera. And the first thing we can start with is by shooting in a one layer. And that means, like in this example right here, that the whole image is in focus. We don't have anything out of focus. We don't have that shallow depth of field. We don't have any depth of field. So that means everything is in one layer. As you can see, the airplane with the paper is in focus. The people that are rolling that paper over the airplane are in focus, and then the background is in focus. Everything is just in focus. Now, this is a very good example on how not to do it. There is the red cross. When it comes to DSLR cinematography, we always have to work with that shallow depth of field. Even when you're doing a long shot, make sure to have something in front. And then I'm talking about the second layer. That means we can put one layer in focus and the other layer out of focus. For example, something like this here. We don't need anything in the foreground in particular. Like in this shot, we can just bring the focus to the front and the subject out of focus in the background. Now this is a two-layer composition. And here is another image where the foreground is out of focus and where the guy who is working on the airplane is in focus. You can see this as a two-layer composition. You know, those bars is the first layer and the guy is the second layer. This is the minimum that you can go with DSLR cinematography. Always make sure you are working in a minimum of 2 layers. Now we can bring this even a step further. Let's take a look at 3 layers. The guy in the left is layer number 1. The guy in the middle is layer number 2. And the background is layer number 3. And this is a very good example. And as you can see, this really gives that cinematic look that we're all looking for. And then you can even go further, like a 4-layer composition. And then I'm talking about focus pulling from one layer to another. You can of course also do that with a 2-layer composition or 3-layer composition. Focus pull between those layers. So when you're out there filming, always keep that in mind, those layers. Always make sure to have a minimum of 2 layers, and then we're talking about DSLR cinematography. Alright, the next thing I want to talk about is framing. And I have a very good example from a motion pictures film. It's from the film Mr. Nobody. I think they really introduced that experimental framing. If you haven't watched that film yet, for any DSLR filmmaker out there, this is really a must to see. It's a great film and the cinematography is just amazing, really. So as you can see, this is a very strange framing of the camera. Normally you don't do that, cut someone off in the middle of their head. But then again, it works. Because on the right side, you also have some information, that sign that says stairs. They have really thought about that. So when it comes to experimental framing, make sure that you know what you are doing, of course. There are basic rules when it comes to framing. Like we've got the rule of thirds, we've got head space, we've got a view space and all that kind of stuff. And as you can see in this frame here, the eyes are on that rule of thirds. The mouth is on that rule of thirds. You can see that that rule of thirds really is in that framing, although we have cut off his head in half. So whenever you do experimental framing, make sure you always keep those basics in your framings. Now that is also something which DSLR filmmaking is all about, that experimental stuff. Now talking about experimenting, this is also something to really work with. This here is the macro shot. With the DSLRs, we have the possibility to interchange lenses, and you can also buy macro lenses. There are even very cheap ones out there. You also have more expensive, but you have that possibility. You also have the option to put an extension tube in front of your lens. Just search that on Google and you will find more information about extension tubes for macro possibilities. Now, when you take a look at this shot here, you can really see that we have an extreme shallow depth of field. Only a few hairs from the eye is sharp. Now, this is something that you don't see much. Even in motion picture films, you don't often see something like that because that would require very high-end lenses, and it's not that easy always to shoot with a big camera that close up. Now with a DSLR camera, it's very simple. You've got that small camera, just put on a macro lens and point at something. You can get great results out of this. This is also again experimental and it works great. This is DSLR cinematography. Now, when talking about cinematography, what you also see a lot in motion picture films is the art direction. And that is also something where DSLR filmmakers get wrong sometimes. Because the images that come out of the camera look so great with that shallow depth of field, they totally forget about art direction. And here's also an image from the film Mr. Nobody. And as you can see, when you take a look at the scene, it's just amazing with those three colors and then the bench in green. Now this is art direction. Now, whenever you're doing a narrative or a fiction film or a short film or anything like that, really try to work on that art direction. The same thing goes for lighting. Cinematography is also all about lighting. And here you can see a scene that has been lighted out. So you can also see that we've got 3 layers here, by the way. You see that little flower on the front. That's layer number 1. Then we've got the 2 people, the man and the wife, is the second layer. And then the boy on the background is the 3rd layer. Now, the boy on the background has been lighted out from the right side, as you can see. It might look the window on the right, but it's actually a 1000 watt lamp to get that effect. Same thing goes for the 2 actors on the front. They have been lighted out, and that's a key thing when it comes to cinematography. You cannot forget about lighting. There's a great course, by the way, on Tuts Plus Premium where you can find all the information about lighting. Now, whenever you combine art direction with lighting and experimental and good camera frames, then you really get that DSLR cinematography. And then finally, I want to show you what you can do with DSLR toys. Previously in this course, I had a lesson about DSLR toys. And I really suggest to work with them. And one of those toys is a slider. And that slider, I really recommend you to buy one of those. Even when you go out to film an event or a reportage. Back in the days before the DSLR camera, you would just put the camera on your shoulder and make those 1-layer shots on an event, maybe 2 layers now and then. And you didn't have any movement, it was all on shoulder or on a tripod, and that was it. Now, because the DSLR is a pretty small camera, now you can just take your tripod, put your slider on it, and make those cinematic shots that you would never see when it comes to a reportage or an event. And I've got a great example right here about an Apple event. Now, as you can see, there were a lot of people there, so it's not really convenient to start doing dolly shots and all that kind of stuff. But just with that small slider, look at what you can accomplish. This is almost a film that I'm looking at. Well, it's actually an event. Now you can find the link in the description down below to view the whole reportage of this. I do aware you, it's in Dutch, but for the people that speak English, just look at the video images. Alright guys, that was it for this lesson. I've given you some basic information about cinematography. Now it's not easy to talk about that, because DSLR cinematography is something so experimental that it's hard to say what is wrong or what is right. Now in the next lesson, I'm going to dive a little more deeper into the cinematography. I'm going to talk about how small the camera is and that you should use the DSLR camera as a small camera, so that you not always have to build it out like a big rig and shoot like that on it. Alright, thanks a lot for watching.